Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar with Jo Morley. We're going to be covering a beginner's guide to Microsoft Teams. Jo's going to tell you all about it. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, which is due to last about an hour, just ask it in the question box, which you should see on the sidebar, and we'll try to get to them. Probably in chunks, and afterwards there will be a recording of this session which we will make available on our on-demand section of our website. So that's it for now. I will be turning my camera off, but over to you, Jo.
Cool, thanks very much, Melissa. Good afternoon to everyone who's joined. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here with me today. As Melissa has said, this is very much a beginner's guide to Microsoft Teams. We're not going to go too in-depth into document sharing, collaboration just yet. That will come tomorrow. So if you do have time at the same time tomorrow afternoon, it'll be great to have you here. Today, what we'll be going over are the very, very basics. The interface, how you have chats with one another, and also how you have group chats together with your colleagues. We'll go over calling and what the calling interface looks like, and then we'll go over meetings as well. What the meeting interface looks like, how you have meetings, and some best practice of what comes with meetings too. I'm not going to stick on slides this entire session either. It will be a live demo, and I think the theory of Teams is fairly well known. We want to stay in touch with one another, and just like any other tool that you'll be used to using today, you learn best by doing, and I'm a firm believer in that as well. So this session is all about getting you started so that immediately after you can be messaging your colleagues, annoying your manager by sending messages, pictures, GIFs, etc. But before we begin, I just want to start with our core values. As a company, Software One live and breathe by our core values, all 7 of them, but when we're doing presentations for customers and for each other's as well, we normally call out 1 or 2. For me, customer focus and passion, I live and breathe these myself. I am a customer-facing resource. I work with companies to help them get better when it comes to Office 365, but also when it comes to modern workplace as well. And for passion, hopefully it should be apparent throughout this session that I really do love the technology too. So with that in mind, if you do have any questions throughout this session, or if you have any questions afterwards, either ask your IT teams to get in touch with me and it'll be a pleasure to help them out, in turn to help you out, or alternatively, just get in touch with me directly. And it would be great to speak to you again in future. So in terms of the agenda, we'll get an overview as to Microsoft Teams, what we'll be covering, things like that. Next, we'll go over the interface, what Microsoft Teams looks like, and what areas you'll be spending most of your day in. I will also call out a few key areas such as settings that you might want to take a look at once you finish this session straight away, so that you can, for example, change the theme of Microsoft Teams because light mode is not best mode, for you to change your notification settings and also what devices you're called on. For example, if you want to be called on your headset, or if you just want to use your speaker and microphone as I'm doing today. From there, we'll go into private and group chat, sort of the physics behind chatting to one another, and also how you bring more people into that conversation as well. We'll then go into calls and meetings, what it means to just pick up the phone and ring someone, but also how you organize meetings with your colleagues too. And then finally, we'll finish on a Q&A and we'll talk about the next session as well. I would encourage you throughout all of this session today is ask questions over in the right-hand side. If they're difficult, it'll make me look a little bit puzzled, but I will always follow up on whatever questions that I can't answer today as well. So if that means that you have something that I can answer on the call, I can almost guarantee that everyone else on this call will be thinking the same. So no stupid questions, there's only stupid answers, because I want you to learn. And you're taking the time to invest in me, the very least I could do is invest back in you. In terms of the content, we are covering the basics, and I mean that at a very fundamental level. This is to give you foundational knowledge of Teams so you can get started straight away. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about what it's like to work in a team, as in the namesake of what Microsoft Teams is. Think of it like a band naming their debut album after themselves. So we won't be going into the Teams aspect today, but we absolutely will tomorrow. And if you don't have time tomorrow to join, please ask those questions today, and I'll make sure to answer them at the end. And then finally, in terms of the agenda, we are talking Teams. If you do have any questions around the modern workplace, whether or not that means Exchange, Outlook, PowerPoint, Excel, sort of the things that you're used to already. Or if you've got questions about how you utilize the Power Platform and Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate, I'd love to answer those questions too. But please ask them at the end, and I'd take that time for you afterwards. Goals of the training: give you an understanding of the basics of Microsoft Teams, highlight some features that you may or may not already know about. Hopefully you get to go away with a bit of both, and then of course answer any questions that you may have as well. So this session is for those with little or no experience using Microsoft Teams. Or for those of you who are using Teams today, it's a refresher of the basics. And so many of our customers come to us and say, we're already using Skype for Business, or we're already using other applications. How can we best tell our users about this? And for me, the easiest way is show you what you could do in Skype, and then you build on that knowledge yourselves. So first of all, we'll be giving sort of an introduction as to what it's like to chat to one another, but also what it's like to call one another as well. Understand the interface, because once you get over that first hurdle, it's really easy to build on that knowledge. And I really want to give you the confidence that after today, you can chat with your coworkers and colleagues, and you can just call one another whenever you want to. And then finally, how we make groups, as in private chat groups, how we make calls with one another, and how we schedule meetings as well. So, as I promised, I'm not going to spend my time in PowerPoint, and in fact, I will be jumping directly into Microsoft Teams. So this will look a little bit different if you're used to using the desktop application, and that's because I am using it in a web browser. But that means very little for you. The interface looks fairly similar, and you would expect the very same buttons, features, calling, etc. on your desktop app that's been provided to you by your IT department as you would from what I'm showing on screen. There is one caveat to this, is that unfortunately, because of the amount of people on this call, I don't know what your organization has configured when it comes to Teams. So if there are things that haven't been turned on or things that haven't been configured inside your organization, that's something to chat to your IT department about. And they'll probably give a really good reason as to why that is. So with no further ado, welcome to Microsoft Teams. As you can see here, it's a fairly blank interface, especially when you get started. Over here on the left-hand side is what's known as your application bar. So activity, chat, Teams, calendar, calls, and files. Across the top, you have your new chat button, you have your search bar, and over here on the right-hand side, you'll have either your initials or your picture. So depending on what you've set, if you click on those, this is your settings bar, and this is where we're going to start today. So first of all, providing that your organization's allowed it, you can change your picture. So you will see it throughout most of Office 365 if your organization's been using it for a little while. Or if you're just new to Office 365, this icon appears next to your emails, in documents. It also appears, of course, in Microsoft Teams. And it's a great way to be a little bit more individual rather than just your initials. Of course, it's up to you whether or not you upload your picture. But to do so, click change picture, upload it, and then set sort of what angle, etc. that you want to be seen from. Next down on the list is your status. So if you're already using Teams today, or if you've been using Skype for Business in the past, this will be familiar to you. Your status is a visual representation as to what you're up to. It's automated, but I wouldn't say it's clever. Your status is automatically fed through from your Outlook calendar, and whether or not you're actively at your desk, or in reality, whether or not you're signed in. So most of the time you will be available, which is green. And you will notice this status icon inside email, inside Outlook when you're sending email, and inside Skype for Business on Microsoft Teams too. So when you're green, you're available. People can get in touch with you and people can send you messages. If you're busy, normally what that is indicated from is your calendar inside Office. So if you have a meeting set and you attend that meeting, your status will automatically change to red, as in busy. If you also answer a call, it will change that status too. But do be aware that if you're invited to a meeting, but you don't actually attend it, you will still automatically show as busy. This is what I mean by automated, but not clever. Next on down on the list is do not disturb. And this is a really interesting status. It's one that you set yourself. And what Do Not Disturb does is it will automatically mute all notifications coming from Microsoft Teams. So whilst we're working remotely, we'll probably find ourselves actually doing a lot more work than what we would do in the office. And unfortunately for some, the pressure to always maintain green is sometimes overwhelming. One thing, you don't have to stay green. You wouldn't do in the office. You'd be going for your coffee, you'd be chatting to your co-workers. It's very rare that you would be green all the time. But what Do Not Disturb enables is the idea that you need to crack on with stuff free from distractions yourself. So if you set Do Not Disturb, it will automatically mute all phone calls and it will mute all messages that are sent directly to you. And so the benefit of that is that you're free from distractions. You can get on with the work that you need to get on with, and you can catch up with these conversations later, just as you would with Outlook. You'd close it, you won't receive any notifications, any pings in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can just crack on with what you need to. Do be aware that if you are on Do Not Disturb, you need to manually turn yourself off Do Not Disturb as well. So if you do keep it on all day, all your notifications will be hidden away as well. The final two, be right back and appear away. These are known as away statuses. So the automated aspect is that if your computer locks or if you don't touch your mouse or have any action in the background, you'll show as away. There is no shame in being away. I know that when a lot of customers talk to me and they feel pressured that they always have to be green, you don't have to be. At the end of the day, we're all humans, right? And for those who do game being away and showing green, this is a shout out for you. If you do set yourself to be right back or appear away manually, it's just a nice thing for your colleagues to know that, okay, they're not at the desk, I'll get in touch with them in a second. And on that note, beyond statuses is your status message. So if you are on Do Not Disturb, set yourself with a status message just saying what you're up to. The best thing we can do is communicate, even when we don't want to communicate with people. So if you set yourself as Do Not Disturb, really busy, working on documentation, I'll get back to you later today, that's a good enough indication that people shouldn't be bugging you. To give an example of what I use Do Not Disturb for, if I'm away for my one mandated exercise session per day, I will set myself as Do Not Disturb. I'll set my status message as out of the house. And then if people try to get in touch with me, they'll know that I'm not going to answer straight away. So as to what that looks like, you go into here and it's almost like setting your out of office in Outlook. Type your status, show it to when people message you, which means they get a pop-up, just as if they got an automated reply from Outlook. And then you can also set a time as to when that status message will disappear. Just on that note, if you do set yourself as out of office, for example, if you're going on holiday to your living room or your kitchen, your out of office will automatically feed through from Outlook. So you don't need to set it in both locations. Next down on the list is your saved messages. As we go through more today, you will see the idea of saving messages. Basically, it's your way of pinning your favorite messages. So whether or not someone says a really funny joke that you want to save for later, or in fact, something really important that you need to be considerate of when you're putting together a piece of work, save those messages and it sets it as almost a bookmark for you to refer to at a later date. And then finally, on the settings that I'll go through today, is more general settings around Microsoft Teams. So first of all is the ability to set your theme, and whilst I'm here, I'm going to change it to dark mode. And then you can set your language, your keyboard settings, etc. Next down on the list is your privacy settings. So while you are on Do Not Disturb, you can have VIPs that can break through that barrier. So for example, if you wanted to add your line manager to those that can contact you and notify you even when you're on Do Not Disturb, I can start typing their name. And what that means is that if I am set to Do Not Disturb and a sire messages me or calls me, I will receive that notification. It blocks everyone else except a sire. And so my advice is get your VIP set up sooner rather than later, because at least you'll remember to do so. And then at a later date, when you do set yourself on Do Not Disturb, you're not going to miss every single message that comes through. If I just jump back in, you also have a really important aspect, which is read receipts. If you use any other app to stay in touch with people, read receipts should be sort of daily nature to you. Read receipts are basically a little blue tick, or in Microsoft Teams case, an eyeball, to show whether or not the message has been, first of all, delivered, but secondly, read. If you turn off read receipts, it's a give and take. So if you don't want to send read receipts, the other person also won't send read receipts to you. So just be aware of that. If you don't want other people to see that you've read their messages, just be aware that you won't be able to see if they've read your messages. And then finally, I'll end on notifications. Calls is more of a general what device, etc. do you want to use. Microsoft Teams is really granular when it comes to your notifications. And the reason for it is that it's work on your terms. In Outlook, notifications are either on or off. You really don't have too much of a choice as to who gets in touch with you, how they get in touch with you, and in fact, when they get in touch with you. I'm sure we're all guilty, especially whilst we're working from home, of picking up our phones whilst we're watching TV on an evening. Whereas with Teams, you have a lot more control over how people get in touch with you and when you want them to get in touch with you as well. So you can set notifications for practically everything that happens in Teams. And as we go forward with today's session, you can mute and unmute colleagues. And with tomorrow's session, you can also mute and unmute specific channels too. So you're not just being hammered by every single conversation taking place. Again, I would recommend that you set your notification settings sooner rather than later. One, because you can change them. And two, because it means that you get it out of the way. You set it up so that it works for you and not the other way around. For many people who I work with when it comes to Microsoft Teams and the training that I deliver, a really big concern is it's just something else that I need to keep on top of. And if that's the case, use it like you would email. Keep it in the background, check it once or twice a day. You don't have to stay on top of it if it doesn't work for you. But the idea is that the more you spend time with it, the more that your colleagues start communicating with you in Teams, the more natural it will feel for you to stay in touch with each other as well. And so with that in mind, I will come out of the settings and then we can crack on with the actual interface outside of it. So as I've mentioned, I have turned this to dark mode. So if your Teams window is blindingly white, you can change it yourself in your settings, but for everything else I'm showing you, it will look and feel the same. So over here on the left-hand side, we'll start going through the application pane. So first of all is activity. Teams generates a lot of notifications, providing you're mentioned, of course. It's a chatty way of working. And the idea is that it should be more conversational, it should be more flowy, and it should feel less formal than email. But as I'll go on to explain later, it is still as formal as email. So your activity, think of it like your inbox in Outlook. It's all the things that you've missed out on through the day, whether or not you've not been available, whether or not you've missed a phone call, if someone's mentioned you in a team and you've not caught up to it just yet. You get your activity bar over on the left and it shows you notifications. And as you can see here, the ones that I'm yet to view are the ones that are in bold. So as I click through them, you'll see that it takes me direct to that part of the conversation where I've been mentioned. So if I keep going, Pradeep has liked my response that I posted here. Continue going down. Johanna responded to a conversation that I started earlier. And the list goes on. Basically, it's your way of staying in touch even when you weren't available at a point in time. And I use the activity feed just to keep on top of things if I've been on Do Not Disturb or if I've been away from my desk for any period of time. Next on the list is chat, and I won't spend too much time on it just now because I will be spending a little bit more time on it this session. But this is where all your one-to-one and your immediate group conversations are stored. Chat is less formal than a Microsoft Teams conversation, and it's really hard to differentiate the two. But the easiest way of doing so, chat is here, Teams are here. I'll be spending more time on Teams tomorrow, but Teams are where you get work done together. They are a more structured way of organizing your files, organizing your conversations, and everything else in between. But as I say, I won't be spending too much time on it today because Teams really deserves its own session. And in fact, it really deserves 3 or 4 of its own sessions. But just to get started, it is really simple. And from everything I show you today, hopefully we'll be able to build on tomorrow. Next is Calendar. Calendar is automatically fed through from your Outlook. If your organization is already using Office 365, you will see this populated for you already. If they're new to Office 365, this tab might not appear for you. But if that's the case, then no worries, you can still set up your meetings inside Outlook as you do today. And again, I'll be focusing some time on this, so I'll make sure that we can work on this together in a little bit. Calls is self-explanatory. It's where calls happen between you, your colleagues, or a group of colleagues as well. If you have phone system enabled in Teams, this will also show a dial pad that you'll be used to, but otherwise it's just phone calls that happen over the internet. In fact, one of the beauties of Microsoft Teams is that whoever you're calling, even if they don't have Teams on the other side and your organization enables it, you can still have that conversation. And in fact, the same goes for meetings as well. But again, I'll touch on that more when we get into meetings themselves. And then finally, on the left-hand side here is the Files tab. I wouldn't recommend this as a place to go searching for all of your documents. That's better saved for Teams. But it's a really quick view of things that you've been working on recently. So as you can see here, I've not been working on anything, but it does give you a really quick indication of all the files available to me if I wanted to jump in and just start working straight away. And then you've got three little dots. Anywhere you see three dots in Teams, you've got a whole treasure trove of additional features for you to play with. Treasure trove, maybe not the best word, it's definitely less interesting than that. So in this case, it's all my additional applications. But as we see when we start working more in Teams, and I'll show you that again today, you'll see those three little dots practically everywhere that you look. From the top bar, as I mentioned, you've got your new chat tab up here at the top. So if I click that and start typing, I can start typing a person's name, one of my colleagues, and then down here at the bottom, I've got my message bar. And that's it. That is my first chat to have with a colleague. It's as simple as that. So just as a refresher, click the new chat icon up at the top, type in a person's name, and then type your message down here at the very bottom. And in doing so, it's sent direct to the other party. And you can see here the read receipt that I mentioned earlier. So if the person has seen your message, it's not working just yet, it will turn to an eyeball. Next, just along the top, and the last thing that we'll talk about from the interface is the search bar. Search in Microsoft Teams is in fact really powerful, and it covers everything from messages that have been sent to one another, to people, to departments, to teams themselves. So for example, if I search for marketing, it's going to search for every single message that someone has sent me, including the word marketing. It won't find any people who work in marketing because there's none in this tenant, but it will also show me any files that have to do with marketing as well. So the best advice I can give is if you've lost something or you just want to try and find something really quickly, use the search bar instead. And in fact, you can search for people too. So in this case, I'm going to search for Alex, and it's going to bring me up to the conversation that I've been having with Alex earlier. And so from here, I'll stay in this window and I'll start talking about chat. Chat, as I mentioned earlier, is less formal than email. I really don't want to say informal, and I'll go into explain that at the end. But the long and short of it is that your organization can still see messages that have been sent here. This is ultimately, at the end of the day, a secure and compliant way of working together. So just be aware that whilst it feels a little bit more conversational and flowy, that it is still audited and still subject to subject access requests, data access requests under GDPR, or if you're a government organization, GDPR, freedom of information requests as well. So with that out of the way, everything that you post in chat is natural, it's conversational, it's flowy, it's so quick to stay in touch with one another. And this to me is one of the best benefits over email. Email is something that is dear, hope you're well, hope you're staying safe, long message of what you want them to do. So basically all your sort of Pleasantries at the beginning are irrelevant. Kind regards, Joe. Whereas in fact, when it comes to chatty conversation, it's much more direct and to the point. You're not wasting time on those formalities because they're aware, just as you are, that you want to get stuff done. So we've already mentioned what it is to start a new chat. It's just that button up at the top left-hand side. So whilst I'm in this conversation with Alex, you've got your tab bar up at the top, which shows your chat, of course. Shows what files I've shared together with Alex. So if I wanted to work with Alex and shared a document with him, I can see that file here. Go on to explain that in a second too. Continuing along the top, you've got your organization. This is dependent on your company setting this up internally. But if you work for a larger organization, it's a great way of identifying, first of all, who works with who, but also who works for who. So in this case, I can see that Alex works with Adele and Bianca, but I can see that their line manager is Miriam. And then Miriam, of course, reports to Patty at the top. If I hover over any of these contacts, I can message them directly. I can see who they work for and who they work with, or I can call them direct from this screen as well. So if I'm having a chat with Alex and he says, hey, you know what, Adele would be much better to talk to this about, I could click on organization, find Adele, and just give her a call from here. In fact, where you see anyone's name in Microsoft Teams, you can hover over them, and then you get all of these buttons for you to work with. Of course, including the archaic and dinosaur Microsoft Outlook send an email. Continuing along, you've got your activity as well. So this shows everywhere that you've been working together with, in this case, Alex. So as I'm working together with Alex in different teams, different locations on different documents, this activity overview tab gives me a real clear indicator as to how we've been working together. And it's also a really quick way of catching up. I don't have to search through and scroll through all kinds of different interfaces to see what's going on. I click activity and I can see everywhere that Alex has been taking part. And I'll just click on chat once again, and I'll focus on these buttons over on the right-hand side. Microsoft Teams wants you to talk to one another, forgive me. As you can see, you've got your webcam and you've got an audio call. In fact, on the desktop version, you have one more button, which is share your desktop. As I say, Teams wants you to talk to one another as much as possible, and you will see these icons practically everywhere. When you click on the video call icon, that's going to turn your webcam on. It won't turn the other person's webcam on. When you press the audio call button, it will start a phone call, like any phone call you've ever had in the past. Basically, you put your headset on, they answer, and you can start chatting straight away. There's no telephone number or anything clever happening in the background. It just happens over the internet. Providing they've got Teams installed and open, they'll receive a notification and it will say, in this case, Megan wants to start a video or a telephone call with you. And they can choose to turn their webcam on, or they can choose to just answer with their microphone. Another really common question I get from my colleagues and from customers is, I don't want to be on webcam. You always have the opportunity to say no. You will never be surprised that you find yourself on webcam. And if that's not enough of a reassurance for you, I can imagine that you already have some masking tape or electrician's tape stuck over your webcam today already. You will never be surprised that you end up on camera. And then finally, on the right-hand side is these add people icons. So it's two people with a plus icon next to them. If you're having a conversation with someone and you think, you know what, this is probably best that we drag a few more people in here, click on add people and start typing a few names. So in this case, a few people that we've been bothering already, Adele and Asaya. I type their names in. They automatically complete. You don't have to fill out everyone's full name. As long as you get the first few initials right, it will find them. And then I click add. And from there, I've made my very first group chat. I type my message down in the bar at the very bottom, press enter, and it sends it to Adele, Alex, and Asaya together. Your group chats work practically exactly the same as your one-to-one conversations. The interface looks fairly similar. You've got everyone who's a part of the group up here. and you've got your call icons over here as well. One benefit you do have over one-to-one conversations is that you can rename the chat too. So if you've got a fairly big group chat going on and you've got quite a lot of them, it can be quite easy to forget what that group chat's actually about. So if that's the case, give it a meaningful name. And so it just makes it easy for you to refer to in the near future. And you can see over here on the left-hand side, it's changed that name as well. So that when I'm browsing through my list of conversations here on the left, I can just know what that conversation's about and jump straight into it. There's just one final thing that I want to talk about from the chat interface. Hopefully it should all make sense as to why you would chat with one another and also how you do so. New chat icon up in the top, type the person's name, type a message in the bar down at the bottom. But there's a lot of icons down here too. So we'll start from left to right. You have your format icon if you're wanting to type a longer message or you're wanting to make things a little bit easier to understand. You can format your message just as you would an email. So you can have headers, you can make your text bold, you can add in tables. If you're a developer working with a development team, you can set pre-formatted text and fixed width text. Basically, it's up to you how you want your message to be sent. Most of the time though, honestly, I stay with just the basic message and go from there. Next is your urgency settings. So no doubt you might be familiar with urgency in email. The little red, this message is urgent, that no doubt you all already ignore today. And you can send your chat messages as urgent too. However, there's one more, and it's probably at the behest of your colleagues that I mentioned this, but that's urgent. As you can see here on screen, if I send this message to Alex, it's going to send him a notification every 2 minutes for the next 20 minutes. This is an equivalent of sending an email to someone every 2 minutes until they answer. Or if you remember nudges in MSN Messenger, it's just as annoying as that. This is boy who cried wolf territory, right? If anyone uses urgent messages with me, there best be a good reason for it, because it is quite annoying, and especially if you do this in group conversations as well. If after this call that your colleagues do go away and start abusing this feature, remember the 3 little dots that I told you about earlier? You can click on more options and mute conversations. So if people are perhaps abusing the urgent notification, or they're just sending you messages whilst you're trying to get on with someone, something, click more options by their name, and then click mute or unmute. Anyway, continuing on, we've got the attach icon, which is a small paperclip down at the bottom. This is very dependent on your organization using OneDrive today. Apologies if that doesn't mean anything, but hopefully for many of you, it should be a familiar name. OneDrive is your cloud storage. Instead of Teams working like email, where if you want someone to check a document or make changes, you attach a copy of that document to an email and you send it to them. They make their changes and they send it back. At that point, you've actually got 3 copies of the same document: the one you've sent, the one they've edited, and the one they've sent back to you. Whereas in Microsoft Teams, there's always only one source of the truth. So for example, I have shared a document with Alex already, but I'll show you what it looks like to share a document. So I click on the paperclip icon, I click on OneDrive, or I can upload from my computer, and I select a document that I want to share with Alex. So in this case, it's going to be the sales invoice template. I click share and I ask Alex to take a look. I send that message, and just like Blue Peter, here's one I've done earlier. So just as a reminder, the dark background is Megan, the light background is Alex. So I've received this message from Megan. Alex, can you take a look? And it's a sales invoice that I've just shared. In clicking into it, it opens up the document directly in Microsoft Teams. I wouldn't recommend that you spend all your time here if you can help it. Mainly because if you format your documents or you've got lots of templates, they simply just work better inside the native desktop version of Outlook, of Office that you're using today. And so if that's the experience that you want and you want to drop into your full fat version of Office, again, these three little dots come into play up in the top right-hand side, and then you select Open in Desktop App. And what that will do is it will open that Word document, Excel, or PowerPoint in the application that you are used to, the one that you know and love, and you can just get cracking on work from there. But if I just want to make a few very quick changes, I can, for example, change the font color up here. I can perhaps make this italic. And one of the beauties of this is that any change I make inside Microsoft Teams, in fact, any change I make across any file stored in Office 365 is saved automatically. And so if I just go back to Megan over here on the left-hand side, and I put them side by side for you, I can go into this sales invoice template. And of course, as with any live demo, I've got to be careful that it actually works. You can see that these changes automatically happen. Instead of email where Alex would have had to send that document back to me for me to see those changes, it's one source of the truth, not 11 sources of the truth, one. So I can see that the text has turned to red. I can see that the invoice has turned to italic, but that's really not too groundbreaking. The fact, by the way, of the groundbreaking stuff is that I've got this document open with two people at the same time. So I don't have that notification of this file's locked for editing by another person. Do you want to notify or open as read only? In fact, you both open the document at the same time together. And so in this case, in Megan's window over here on the left, I can see that Alex already has this document open. And over here on Alex's window on the right, Megan has this document open. And in fact, as I'm scrolling through this, I can see exactly where Alex is inside that document too. And so if I'm here changing the Contoso Limited, I can see over here on the right-hand side, it's updating that document as I type. This works exactly the same on your mobile phone, on your desktop PC, or inside Microsoft Teams. It doesn't matter how you want to work or where you want to work from. This experience will be the same for you too. And in fact, you can have tens of people, if not hundreds, working together in the very same document as you at the same time. So just as a reminder, if you upload a document for you to work together on inside Microsoft Teams, one, it's stored in the cloud, so it's central, you can access it from anywhere. And two, your colleagues can jump into that document with you at the same time, and they can make changes to that document with or without you there. So the next time you open that file will be the most up-to-date version of that file as you need. So instead of having to search through your Outlook for different versions and different histories, is this one the right one? You will always know that if you get your file from Teams, it will be the right one. Providing, of course, your colleagues actually use the same system. So just coming out of that document, I will make Megan big once again, and I'll just continue on down along this line here. So these three buttons are depending on what your organization turns on. So you've got your emojis, you've got your GIFs, if your organization allows GIFs, and you've got stickers as well. These are just your way of brightening up conversations and making things a little bit more fun. At the end of the day, we're all stuck inside the prison of our homes, so it's nice to be a little bit more human sometimes. And then finally, there is schedule a meeting. If you just want to organize a meeting between you and a few other people, you can click that here. And you can see it opens up the new meeting interface directly with Alex. And what that will do is send Alex a notification that I want to have a meeting with him, just like you would expect from an Outlook calendar invite today. In fact, this does send an email to Alex, and it does send him an Outlook calendar invite as well for him to accept. That is it from the chat interface. There's one more thing that I want to just add on at the very end, just as a nice to have, and that's praise. Praise is a nice, fluffy, generational kind of way of rewarding people for their effort and hard work. You can select one of these icons. And when you send it, it sends it in chat. And of course, you can send praise not only to individuals, but to group chats and of course, entire teams if you want. It's a nice way of calling people out, and people like to be told that they've done a good job. that is it for chat. Melissa, has any questions come through so far?
Yep, lots.
Oh, interesting. Cool.
Okay, so I'll start. Do we still need to password protect files sent to others within Teams?
Depending on organizational sort of structure, if you send files like this one-to-one, you are keeping that file between you and that other person. If you upload a file into a Microsoft Teams site, you're sharing it with your entire team. So just be aware of the content of that file. If you're happy for the other person to see it, then great. But do be aware that they could download it and share it with someone else.
Okie dokes. I hope that answered the question, Kim, but if you've still got follow-up questions, just ask us about that. Is it possible to transfer a Teams call from one device to another, e.g. start on your laptop, then transfer it to Teams on your mobile?
Really, really great question. And in fact, one that I would cover off later, but I'll answer it now. If it's in a meeting, as in it's an organized, structured call that you've put together, 100% yes. And in fact, I do that most of the time because I like to pace. So I'll answer the call on my Teams device, on my Surface. Again, this is stressing that it's a meeting. And I'll also join the meeting on my mobile phone, because you can join a meeting on many devices at the same time. Just as I'm doing today, by the way, I've got my Surface down here, I've got the PC that I'm presenting from up here. I join on both devices, I hang up on one, and the meeting continues on my phone as I go pace around on my landing. So as I say, structured calls, absolutely yes. Just sign in on both, sign into the meeting on both, then drop from the one that you no longer want to be on.
Cool. Then I think you answered this with the mute button, but the question was, how do I disable a group chat popping up on my screen?
Yeah, so over here with Team Project X, the group chat that I set up earlier, 3 little buttons, basically where everything happens in Teams, mute.
Beautiful.
And that will stop notifications coming up.
See, I was listening, Joe. And then the next question is, do the chats expire after a certain time, i.e. if you're discussing different subjects, can you have different chats with the same person?
No. So chats that you have with an individual. So for example, I'm chatting with Alex here. The best I can do as an end user is hide that chat. And all that's doing, by the way, is tidying up my screen on the left-hand side. But if I start a new chat again with Alex, it's going to bring up that very same conversation I was having before. Chats are one-to-one and they're persistent. So if you remember the dream that Skype sold us of persistent chat, whereas in fact it very rarely worked, Teams messages will stay for as long as your organization has configured. So if your organization has stopped you being able to delete messages, for example, but they have a 90-day retention period, your messages will stay for 90 days, then they're deleted. But if nothing has been configured, they are there indefinitely.
Okay, next one. Where are the documents stored in Teams? Is there some shared storage?
So any documents that are stored in chat here over on the left-hand side are stored in your personal OneDrive. So like that document that I shared with Alex earlier, I have shared it directly from my personal OneDrive. It's a one-to-one relationship. So that means that it uses my OneDrive storage. For end users, you really don't need to worry about that. That's for admins to take care of. For anything that's stored in Teams is stored in a central location instead. That's known as SharePoint. As an organization, you get a lot of storage for every single user that you have. So again, I wouldn't worry too much as to how much storage you have available as opposed to where it's actually stored.
Okay, I'm just going to fly through these others. A file shared from OneDrive, when it's updated in Teams, is this also updated in the OneDrive it was shared from?
Yeah, 100%. In fact, that's what I mean. It is shared from OneDrive.
Okay. Are you still covering calls on this session?
Yeah, I will be.
Yeah.
So if you want to just park maybe a few of these questions, and then I'll cover them off at the end.
Yeah.
So I'm just very aware of the
all right, you crack on because there's a whole bunch more.
There is a whole bunch more, no doubt. For those of you who do have to drop this at 3 o'clock, I will continue on as best as I can, and the recording will be available. So if you're finding this useful so far and you don't want to miss anything else, the rest of the session will be recorded. Just ask all your questions, I'll answer them at the end, and then you can come back, watch it again at the later date. So next on my list that I wanted to talk about is calendar. Calendar is nothing too sexy. It's a calendar. It pulls through from Outlook if you are using Outlook in Office 365. If you're not, this button won't be available to you at all. But for those lucky people amongst us today, we will cover it. So as I say, it looks and feels exactly as your Outlook calendar. It pulls through all of your meetings that you've got going on, and you can click into each of these meetings and see more information about it. So in this case, you can see that I've got a meeting with Alex, again, Blue Petered this one I've done earlier, from 2 till 2:30. I click into the meeting, and for me to join that Teams meeting, what I need to do is over in the top right-hand side, click join. And from there, it takes me directly into the meeting. I'll get onto that in a second. If you just want to organize your own meetings, again, it can be done from this top right-hand side and click on new meeting. And this brings you to a form that is not too familiar, but hopefully should be familiar as I explain it. Add a title, test meeting, set my required attendees, so in this case, Asaya, Adele, and I set when I want this meeting to take place. Let's make it easier. Tomorrow, 3 till 3:30. Doesn't repeat, I don't want a recurring meeting, but if you did have your team meetings, let's say taking place every Monday afternoon, set it as reoccurring. And then it means it's one calendar invite with your team's meeting link sent inside it. And you don't have to continue setting up team meeting after team meeting after team meeting. Just do it once, set your reoccurrence as to when it takes place. And then from there, your colleagues just need to click on join every single day, every single week, and it brings them into the same Teams meeting. It's a great way of just organizing, as I say, your Teams calls or just your catch-ups in general with your colleagues and your peers. Add a location. Of course, we're not all going into meeting rooms and offices. So if you do have offices in future, you would come in here, you select what meeting room you'd want to meet in, and add your agenda for the meeting down here at the bottom. I click send, and that's it. That's genuinely like sending an Outlook calendar invite. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that I was using my own personal PC, you can do this the exact same from Outlook as well. The only difference is that when you open your Outlook calendar, your Skype and Teams call is up in the top left-hand side where this camera is flipped around. So up in the top left-hand side, you click New Teams Meeting. And what that will do is open up a calendar invite with all the Teams information available for you automatically populated at the bottom. And all you'd then need to do is send that email to who you'd want to take part. Providing your organization's configured it, it will work both internal and external, even if they're not using Microsoft Teams. So one of the great benefits is that the other side doesn't have to be using Teams at all. They just need a web browser and internet access, a microphone and a speaker, and they can take part in any conversations, any meetings, etc. with you directly. But just to reiterate, it is depending on your organization turning that on. So once the meeting takes place, once it's time for that meeting to happen, Outlook will first of all remind you this is an online meeting, join from here, or you can go into Teams yourself, click on the meeting, and then click join over in the right-hand side. If you have already sent your meeting invite out and you want to add more participants, just add them from here. So in this case, I'm going to add Alex because I forgot him, send update, and it will send an update to Alex for him to join too. From that point of view, as I've said, calendar invites really aren't that sexy. One interesting feature is the Meet Now button up at the top. And what that will do is immediately bring me into a meeting, and from there, I just need to invite people who I want to be talking to. But I'll go over that as I go over the calling interface in a second. And then finally, on this left-hand side is calls. Again, there's really nothing too much to explain here. It's self-explanatory. This is just a really quick way of picking up the phone and talking to someone, or in my instance, using my microphone and my webcam on my PC. You have your suggested contacts. These are the people who you work with most often, and they'll be brought up here. You can favorite people, add the speed dial, and they'll show up here at the very top. Just a quick way of staying in touch with people if you work for a really huge organization. Continuing down, you've got your contacts. This comes through from Outlook. So if you have Outlook contacts, they'll be populated here. Your call history. So if I have made calls, which in this case I haven't, they will show up here. And of course, Microsoft Teams does take voicemail for you. So if you are on Do Not Disturb and you're not answering phone calls, people do have the option of leaving a voicemail for you. You can play it back from here, so I'll be able to hear what Alex has said. And one interesting feature is if people do leave you a voicemail in Microsoft Teams, it will automatically transcribe to text and send it to you as an email as well. I'm not going to pretend that it's the most perfect transcription, but it is in fact really good. And if you are on Do Not Disturb in Teams, but you are looking at Outlook, it's just a really nice and simple way of just, oh, whoops, I really shouldn't have missed that call. And you can just get straight back in touch with Alex, hover over his picture, as I showed you earlier, and click on the call icon. If you just want to make a really quick call with people, search for their name down here, and then click call. Or if you've got a webcam plugged in, you can click video call as well. If I want to call multiple people, I just add in their name here, and this will ring all of us together into a group call that we can take part in. That's it from the interface point of view. There is one final thing that I want to go through today, and that's what meetings actually look like. So if I go into my calendar and I go into the one that I made earlier and I join that meeting, first of all, when you join a phone call, that is very much like phone calls that you're used to today. It's like picking up the phone and starting a conversation straight away, whether or not that's a group phone call or whether or not that's a phone call with just one person. The benefit of that is that it's really swift, it's really snappy, you're chatting to them straight away. But when it comes to meetings, as in meetings that you've structured, there's a calendar invite that you've sent out, it's time for that meeting to take place, you press join. You're in fact brought to this interface first. And the reason for this is that it's your way of getting ready before you join that meeting yourself. This is known as the pre-stage. Think of it like being behind the curtain before you go out on stage, and it's your way to prepare yourself. It's your way to set whether or not you want your webcam on or off. You can mute and unmute your microphone. And in fact, just a piece of advice, always join meetings muted. It's only polite, mainly because you don't know what conversations are already taking place. And two, it avoids the sort of hassle of you putting your headset on and rustling away in the background. Of course, it also avoids the deep breathing, pets, eating, partner walking behind you in the background, etc. You will also have one more button here on your Microsoft Teams window, and that will be the blur background. Blur background is a really cool feature. So instead of you being able to see my door, I actually hid everything else behind me, like my washing. In Microsoft Teams, you can blur your background so the focus is only on you. It avoids the sort of embarrassing kids crawling into the room and your nanny/partner having to drag your kids out. Blur your background and it makes the meeting and your video about you instead. And then finally, you've got a cogwheel over here on the right-hand side, and that's your way of being able to set yourself up before you go into that meeting. So you set your speaker, you set your microphone, and you set your webcam as well. You also have the option of making a test call. So if you're not too confident about what's going on, or you just want to make sure that everything is perfect and working well before you join that meeting, click on devices, click on test call, it will ring you up and you can chat to it, it'll play that message back and you can just be confident that your microphone, your speakers and your webcam are working. But once you're happy, once everything's set up, once you've muted yourself, most importantly, join now. And this is the meeting interface. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to join this meeting with Alex, I hope. In fact, I'm not going to join this meeting with Alex. So your meeting interface, when other people have joined you, will look very similar to this. So from left to right, you've got the name of the meeting and how long that meeting's been going on for. You can turn your webcam on and off. So if you join the meeting with your webcam turned off and you've seen the rest of your colleagues have their webcams on and they're chatting and talking to one another, you can turn your webcam on inside here too. So if you've not been too confident joining that meeting as to what's going on, join with your webcam off. And then if you see that everyone's just chatting to each other, if everyone's sat there in their pajamas, basically, you can turn your webcam on and join in too. Next along, the most used button, at least for me, is mute and unmute. When you're part of bigger meetings and you're taking part in more collaborative sessions, I would always recommend you mute yourself unless you're talking. First of all, it's just polite. Other people who are taking part, who are actively talking during the session, don't need to hear you sort of breathing down your microphone, chatting to your partner or your kids to the left of you. They don't need to hear you sort of, or your pets running around, and they definitely don't need to hear you deep breathing down your microphone either. So my advice is always mute yourself whenever you're not chatting. And I'll come on to how you can mute other people as well in a second. Next along is the ability to share your screen. So if you're working with others and perhaps you don't want to share a document with them, but you do want to work together on a document, you can share your screen with them. They can see everything going on, but they can't actively make any changes. That's all on you. And also, if you're working with third parties and you just want to show them, hey, this isn't working right, or can you help me out with this? You can also share your screen like that as well. When you're sharing from the desktop version of Microsoft Teams, you have the option of sharing not only your full desktop, as I'm sharing today, but you can share specific applications too. And my advice and recommendation is share as little as you need to first. The worst thing that you can do is accidentally share your entire screen, where you've got your emails open, you've got your documents open, you've got a secure spreadsheet that you've password protected that you don't want other people to see, and you've just accidentally shared your entire screen. In fact, share application by application. And if you need to share more, you can do. It's so much easier to share more when you have to, rather than share everything at the beginning and have to scramble everything back. Continuing on, those three little dots make a return. These are your more options. So you have meeting notes. If you're disciplined, if you have meeting notes, you can put in your comments here. So your agenda, any actions that you ask of other people. And once this meeting's finished, people can refer back to these meeting notes again in future. So it does depend on you being disciplined, of making those meeting notes and reminding people to check up on them after the session. But they do stick with that meeting, which is a great way of taking your meeting notes and not having to take minutes that you then have to put into a Word document that you then share again at a later date. Just do it as the meeting takes place. Enter full screen, self-explanatory, it makes your Teams window bigger. And then finally start recording. Your organization can turn this on or off, so it will very much depend on sort of the settings on your side. But if you want to record your meetings, whether or not it's a training session like this, so you want to refer back to it at a later date, or it's just a session that potentially it's a team meeting that you don't want some people to miss. Either they're busy doing something else, they're unwell, or they're on annual leave. If you record your meetings, it saves them to Microsoft Stream automatically. You can refer back to them at a later date, but you can also share them with your colleagues as well. So if someone was unable to make a meeting, you can share that recording with them and they don't have to miss out. So if you've discussed something really important during a team meeting, or you've held a really great training session that you want people to refer back to at a later date, record the session, share it with that person, and they can catch up even if they weren't available at that point in time. Next on the list is show conversation. So every meeting you host has chat that goes along with it. So if you're part of a really big team meeting, 30, 40, 100 people who are part of this session, and you don't want to speak up and ask your question, you can do so in chat instead. In fact, most of the time, the way that I see this working is that there's conversations taking place in the meeting, audio visual, and then there's also conversations taking place in chat as well. So as you're seeing here with Melissa, when you're asking questions, she's able to respond to you in chat as I'm talking to you here. And the same practically works in Microsoft Teams as well. And the final button on this tab is the Show Participants button. This shows you everyone who is a part of this meeting. Let me just scroll that down. You can see here that Alex has been invited, but he's not responded to the meeting invite. So I can do ask to join, and providing that it's working well, Alex should receive a notification, but as with all live demos, it doesn't work as it should do. So if someone isn't part of your meeting, but you want them to be so, just click on the call icon next to their name. Alternatively, if you've forgotten to invite someone to a meeting and they'd be really pivotal as to what you're talking about, you can invite someone directly from the top here. So all I need to do is type in someone's name, again, as you've seen everywhere else in Teams. And what that's going to do is call Adele straight away. Again, this is a demo, she's not available. But with your colleagues, what that will do is it will call every device they're signed in on, their mobile phone, their desktop, their web client. And from there, they can join your meeting even though they weren't invited. And then finally, it's the icon to the right of that. If you're working with third parties, you can copy the join info and send them an email to say, click on this link, you'll be brought straight into this meeting. So again, if you're having a conversation and it's about something really important, but the right people just aren't there, invite them, use the copy join info, bring them into the call, and they get to take part with you. And in fact, the beauty of this is that no one needs to be part of this meeting in order to take place. No one needs to stay in that meeting for that meeting to happen. So if you as an organizer are unavailable, everyone else can take part in the session without you. And as I mentioned earlier, they can record the meeting and you can play it back at a later date. But for all intents and purposes, joining Teams meetings should be a really natural, I wouldn't quite so much say fun, but fun experience. And it really shouldn't be too much stress to just jump straight in and start having conversations with your colleagues. And hopefully from what I've shown you today, across chat over here on the left-hand side, being able to talk to one another and work on documents together, from your calendar, which is your calendar that's pulled through from Outlook, the calls that you want to be making and receiving inside Teams, and of course the meetings. It should be a really great way to stay in touch with one another. And hopefully after today, you've got some really great actions for you to get messaging each other, calling each other, and of course, starting your first video calls as well. And so from this point of view, that's it for what I'm showing you today. I'll just jump back into the end of the presentation, and then we will finish on questions if that's okay, Melissa.
Yep.
Cool. So I've been really careful to try and call out where organizations could configure Microsoft Teams so it would look a little bit different. And in fact, with the guiding principles, every organization has their own. And so I just want to put some generic things out there for you to think about and perhaps consider when it comes to Microsoft Teams yourself. First of all, video is really encouraged, but it's not required. It's personal preference as to whether or not you turn your camera on and on. Some people are really comfortable with being on webcam. Other people might need a little bit of time, a little bit of sort of coaxing in order to be on camera. And some people simply are not happy to share their personal space. And if that's the case, I would recommend to you as an individual, you as an organization, to not pressure people. At the end of the day, we're all human. Some of us might be comfortable sharing sort of our pajamas, what's going on in the background, our kids running around, etc. Some of us prefer to keep our private life private. But ultimately, I wouldn't pressure people. If people aren't comfortable, they're human. Chat's informal, but please do remember it's written communication. Depending on your organization's compliance and security policies, you might see, for example, the retention periods coming into play, automated deletion of messages, etc. But just do remember that it's very similar to email. If you write it and you send it, be prepared to stand by it in a court of law kind of thing. And Teams is a way of getting things done, and Teams is better with others. If other people don't use it, it really becomes quite stale and hard to use. But the more that you use it, the more that you encourage your colleagues to use it, and the more that they start using it themselves naturally, the better this platform grows and becomes. And of course, from the foundations that I've provided to you today, hopefully you get a really good starting point of building on that knowledge yourselves. As I say, video calls are great to have. They're really engaging, and I'm not using this as a stick to make sure that people pay attention, but it is simply just nice to see one another. And it's nice to stay in touch, especially in a time where staying in touch is hard. We're not seeing each other face to face in the office. We're not getting the opportunity to go for coffee or go out to lunch. So if the second best option is that we get to see each other, share a cup of, maybe not share a cup of coffee, but have a cup of coffee together and work together, then great. And I would encourage it wherever you possibly can. But on that note, as I said earlier, one, don't expect people to always be on camera. And two, if you are joining meetings, don't expect that everyone else is going to be on camera, because I can guarantee my expectation is the image on the left. In reality, it's very much the image on the right when I'm hosting these sessions internally. So a little bit of homework for you, just to reinforce the message that we've been putting across the day and those foundational items. First of all, it would be great if you can go away and start having a chat conversation with your colleagues. That's the little icon on the chat bar on the left-hand side. Type in your colleague's name, type the message down at the bottom. They'll receive it and hopefully they'll respond back to you as well. Next, set up or join a phone call with your colleagues. That's the call icon up in the top right-hand side, or from using the calls button on the left. Pick up the phone, have a chat with them, find out how they're getting on in isolation. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we're missing that human interaction ourselves. And the best thing we can do is check upon one another. Have those conversations, see how people are doing, because mental health is going to play more and more importantly as time goes on. So it's nice to stay in touch. And then finally, set up and host the meeting through either Outlook, that's going into your calendar, new Teams meeting, type in the information, send, or from Microsoft Teams, meetings on the left-hand side, new meeting. Finally, from what's coming up next, we've got Let's Talk Teams taking place at the same time tomorrow. I will, of course, learn from this session and be more timely. But of course, it's a really great way to build on the skills that you have learned today and hopefully give you a little bit more knowledge around what Teams are inside Microsoft Teams. And then finally, if you can't make it tomorrow, one, the session will be recorded, so you can refer back to it at a later date. But there are loads of great resources for you to get better at Microsoft Teams yourselves, and in fact, as an organization too. First and foremost is Microsoft Learn, which is a t-shirt that I'm wearing, not on purpose. docs.microsoft.com/learn is a really great, most importantly, free resource direct from Microsoft for you to upskill in all sorts of areas in regards to Office 365, or if you're interested in being better at business intelligence, automation, there's all kinds of great things going on there. Next, support.office.com. It's all kinds of video and text resources for you to upskill, but also answer any questions that you have using any Office products you're using today. And then finally, a selfish one from me is Adopt 365. softwareone.com/Adopt 365 has loads of great teaching and learning resources for you to take away and get better as an individual and bring your colleagues on board as well. And there's one last thing that I didn't show you. If I go back into Microsoft Teams and I have no idea what I'm doing or I'm a little bit lost, I can click Help over on the left-hand side. And from there, I can see all kinds of help topics and resources, videos, text, etc., to get me started using Microsoft Teams. So after this session, if everything hasn't quite sunk in just yet, Help over on the left, and you've got loads of guides to get you going. And so on that, just want to thank you so much for your time. For those of you that have stayed on to the bitter end, thank you for sacrificing an additional 10 minutes of your day, and stay safe, and thank you again for your time. Melissa, any questions?
Yes, we've got lots of questions. So do you want to answer them now so that it can be part of the recording? So if anyone wants to listen in, they're welcome to stay on and listen to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got the time?
Yeah,
Okay.
So what I would say then is, for those of you who need to drop off, this session is recorded. You can come back to it at a later date and hear these questions. But if you do want to hear the Q&A, then please stick around and I'll do my best to answer what I can.
And just to say about the recording, everyone who's registered for this will be sent an email with a link to the recording. So I know some people are asking, where do they get that? Just give us about 48 hours to get it processed and up online, and we'll send you the link. So, okay, I'm going to just whiz through these questions. On the phone app, you can swipe to highlight the message bubble. Can you do that on the computer version of Teams too?
No.
Okay, that's an easy answer.
So there is a little bit of feature disparity between mobile and desktop. Not only replying works a little like WhatsApp. So for everyone listening in, if you're using the mobile version of Teams, I would try and find a conversation, but it's hard to find one that I can actually use. I don't know how well this is going to show up actually. I can swipe on the mobile phone, and it will show up like a reply button that you'd be used to in WhatsApp. On the desktop version, not yet. There's also another key feature, which is location, that you have on your mobile phone that you don't have on your desktop too.
Okie dokes. Next one. In a group chat, when adding a new participant to the chat, do they see the full history and access to any files that have already been shared?
Yes. Interesting question. I would presume so, but I would have to test that out and get back to you.
Okay. I mean, my expectation would be that they can see the files, but I don't know if they could see the chat. But should we come back to that?
Where I'm coming from with the no aspect of it is that the sharing is a very clear action from OneDrive. Teams doesn't really do anything there. It's all OneDrive in the background powering it. And so if you add someone into a chat, they wouldn't have been there for things taking place earlier. It's definitely true for teams, by the way. So if you're working in a team and someone joins that team, they will have history of the conversations taking place. And they will also have history of any files that have been shared in that team as well.
Okay.
If you can take note of who asked that question, Melissa, I'll happily get back to them.
Yeah, I have done. Okay, so this was, Kim asked this question earlier about securing, putting password protection on, and she just had a follow-up question, which was, is this more secure for file sharing than emails that could be intercepted?
Again, a really interesting question. So emails being intercepted as in a man-in-the-middle attack would be an interesting aspect. At that point, most emails that are sent would be sort of encrypted by Office 365 when you send them. Microsoft Teams builds on the same security. So you still have, for example, when you sign in, you might have to use your mobile phone to authenticate who you are. All messages sent are encrypted over 443. I would say it's as secure, but I wouldn't want to sort of guarantee an additional layer of security. But on that note, if you do want to sort of read into security and trust in Office 365, if you have a Google for Trust Center, Office 365 in general, that will show you all the compliance aspects that Microsoft adheres to when deploying this software to military capabilities, hospitals, law firms, etc. If you do password protect your files today for any reason whatsoever, if it's just because you don't want the other person, or sorry, you want the other person to just make changes to it and no one else in your team on a shared drive, for example, then completely fine. But just be aware that you can encrypt emails that you send from Outlook as well. So again, just a conversation that you have with your organization.
Okay, so Peter, who has since left, but hopefully he'll come back for the recordings, has asked a number of questions. One was, we have OneDrive disabled for users and use SharePoint. Is this a problem? And he follows up with, if you have shared resources and rooms in Outlook Exchange, can you add them to an invite, and can you use Room Picker and see the availability of attendees? Multi-part question.
Yeah, so providing this is all about configuration. As an administrator, you'd have to set this up, of course. But if I go back to my calendar invite and Alex M here, this is the meeting invite I made earlier. I've got my room locations here, so I can see what buildings. Most organizations would have locations, and I can select the meeting room as well. So let's say conference room Adams. As you would be used to in Outlook, you also have scheduling assistant up here too. So I could see when people are available based on their Outlook calendar status, then you would use that scheduling assistant just as you would use Outlook's one too.
Okay. If you look after multiple team members' diaries, can you set up their Teams calls for them?
Yes, it's quite a messy workaround. One, you can't see more than your own calendar in Microsoft Teams. And
that was another question that someone had, is how can we look to see people's availability in Teams? So
availability would be through the scheduling assistant, but it's not the same as Outlook, where you can have tens of calendars open side by side to see who's free. When it comes to organizing other meetings, just be aware that when you organize that meeting, you're going to be a participant. But you absolutely can, as a, let's say, PA or service desk, set up meetings on behalf of other people. They all join. You don't need to join. You could decline that meeting invite if you wanted to, and their meeting would continue.
Okay. I'm just scrolling through. So can you belong to more than one team or set up a private team? I'm sure you're going to cover this tomorrow for the purpose of document sharing. For example, I want to have a one-to-one with a line management structure, but only want to share the documents with that individual.
So if you're working inside a team, as I say, that we'll cover tomorrow, the idea of teams is that you're working together. It's reducing those silos of information. So the intent is that if you are part of a team with tens of your colleagues, they will all see the documents that you upload. However, you can create private channels in teams if your organization allows it. So if you were working together in a much bigger team, but you just wanted to have a conversation one-to-one or one-to-few, let's say that you're a head of a finance department and you've got a few other heads of departments working with you. You create a private channel, invite them in, and only they'd see the conversations that are taking part in that team. Only they'd see the conversations that are taking part, the files that have been uploaded in that channel as well. So you can have a wider group team with private channels as well. But I will cover this tomorrow.
Okay. Can you add external people to calls?
Depending on your organization setting, yes, you absolutely can, but I would check with your IT administrators first. And
Okay.
to do so, by the way, is when you send the invite out or the add participants, you use the other person's email address.
All right, next one was how long does it take the system to learn your most used contacts? We've just installed 3 weeks ago. Will we start seeing this quickly?
Quickly is not subjective. I mean, it does learn from quite a few places. So your contacts, your favorite contacts will just rise to the top naturally. I wouldn't say it should take an infinite amount of time, but it's more about hiding things that aren't useful that will happen over time rather than bringing things to the top. So with chat, for example, it's only your most recent chats that happen over on that left-hand portal, but it will start hiding conversations that aren't too useful for you from 30 to 90 days. And it works exactly the same with teams as well. If you're not spending too much time in a particular team, it will hide them automatically too. But again, something that I will cover off tomorrow.
And you can pin your favorite contacts, can't you? Like the people that you talk to most often.
Absolutely. In fact, I will do it on here. So if I'm talking to Megan and I just want to make sure that her conversations are always up at the top, I again click on those 3 little buttons. If there's ever a way of you thinking, does Teams do this? Go to the little buttons first, click on pin, and it always means that Megan's messages will be over there at the very top.
Awesome. Okay, what license would you need for SMS transcript of voicemail? They've said they currently use E3. So would that be covered in the E3 license?
So if someone has sent you a voicemail through Microsoft Teams, you will be covered in E3. In fact, it's just a feature, but SMS transcript, no. Transcript to email, yes.
Okay. Just reading this, I had a call earlier and could only see the person who was talking. It kept flicking from one to the other and was very distracting. How do I see everyone at the same time?
Sure. So if you have multiple people, it's basically 4. If you've used Zoom in the past, you've got hundreds of people on screen at once. Microsoft Teams will only show 4. So in that case, if everyone's got 4 webcams on, then great. It will show those 4 people. But if you want to sort of favorite, let me go back into this. It's a bit awkward because I can't really show you. You can right-click people's screens on the right-hand side in the participants. I don't think I can do it from here. I can do it from here. If I go and join this meeting, you can right-click someone's name over on the right-hand side, click pin, and what that will do is it will keep their webcam up on screen. So it won't flick back and forth through the different people that are chatting. It will just stay focused on whoever you pin in that conversation. But as I say, maximum of 4.
Okay.
But it will always jump to the active speaker. That's really important to consider, unless you've pinned people.
Okay, how do we find meeting notes? This is from Gordon, who's since left, but I love this. How do we find meeting notes after a meeting? They've lost theirs. How do they find their meeting notes?
So of course, if people do have meeting notes inside their meeting, so take notes, and this might not work, so I might not be able to demo this. It's not 100%. There you go, cool. Every meeting that you have, providing that someone has talked in that meeting or you've uploaded notes for that meeting, will show inside chat on the left-hand side. And so what that means for you is that you can, of course, see any conversations that have taken place in previous meetings. And in this case, I can see the meeting notes that were taken during that call as well. Or alternatively, I can go back to that meeting and I can click on the meeting notes tab. So if I go back in time, maybe 2 or 3 weeks in the past, I can go into that meeting inside Microsoft Teams, click on the meeting notes tab at the top, and they'll all be displayed there as well.
Awesome. Moving on, how do you add a calendar from Outlook?
You can't. It's your calendar that appears in Microsoft Teams is your own personal calendar. So you won't have the ability to open up someone else's calendar or another room, for example. That still happens inside Outlook, unfortunately.
Okay. I'm going to answer the next one. It's, is it okay to share the recording with colleagues? You can absolutely share the link with colleagues. They'll have to input their details to access it, but it's fine to share it as broadly as you like. We just can't, it's not going to be a file that you can download. It'll just be you have to log in to see it online. And then a question about tomorrow. Will you show the planner integration tomorrow?
Yes, absolutely we will. That's one of the last points at the very end, in fact.
Okay. And then moving swiftly on, as a consultant with my own Office 365 login, but working for several companies where I have the client's format email address to work in Outlook, several Exchange server accounts, can my desktop Teams work seamlessly with the client's Teams ID?
So can you repeat that question again, sorry?
Okay, so he's a consultant with his own Office 365 login, but he works for several companies where he has the client's format email address to work in Outlook. And he's got in brackets several Exchange server accounts. Can my desktop Teams work seamlessly with the client's Teams ID?
Really interesting point. So the immediate answer is no, because in the background, it's all in Azure Active Directory. So you have one GUID. So the best way of you working as a consultant in multiple organizations' team sites is you take your one identity and you invite yourself into each of those additional tenants, rather than identity in one place, identity in the next place, identity in the next place. That's not how Microsoft would want you to work. You'd be you as one individual across all of your supported organizations. But that is a little bit of a specialist question. Happy to take that offline and just talk through that one, Melissa.
Okay, that's cool. Right, I think, and then I've got one more. Can you set up virtual teams for projects where you're working outside the standard organizational team? For example, can someone exist 2 teams, one being an interim? I'm assuming this means like if you were going to connect, like let's say I was working with a PR agency externally and I wanted to work on a project with them externally. I think that's what they mean by that.
Yeah, so you can have external collaborators inside Teams. Again, just be aware that they can see every conversation that you invite them into, every file that's in that team. So normally what we would do as an organization, we would create an internal team for us and the account managers and the technology teams, the consultants to work together on. And then we'll create a separate team for the customer to be part of, and we'll have different conversations in each. When you're working with collaborators, it's just very important that they do get to see everything that's stored in that team site. They are, by equivalence, part of your team.
Okay.
By the way, on that very first question, I've been checking it in the background. If you add someone into a group chat, it creates a new group chat. So they won't see any history of that conversation taking place, and they won't see sort of any files that have been shared either.
Right, okay. The last question was just, how do I sign up for tomorrow? I have shared a link and I've shared it to everyone. I don't know if everyone can see it in the answers and the question bit. because it's not an easy URL to try and quote, but we will send out, for everyone who was on today's session, registered for today's, we will send an email out this afternoon with the link of how to go and register for tomorrow's if you want to sign up for that. And again, share it with whoever. We're allowed up to 500 people on these webinars, so whoever wants the free training with Joe, you're more than welcome. We're just trying to help everyone get up to speed as we all get used to this sort of new remote working reality. And as I'm sure you can tell, Joe is our resident rock star on Teams and has been helping all of us within Software One as well. So that's all the questions for now, Joe. I think we can probably wrap up. Thanks to everyone for being on the session. Thank you to you, Joe. And we'll be back for round 2 tomorrow.
Great, really enjoyed it. Thanks everyone so much for your time, for sticking around for an extra half hour. Stay safe and hopefully see you tomorrow.
Cool. Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.